Hey everyone, welcome to today's show on the Savani Real Estate podcast and channel. Thank you for tuning in. So today's discussion is going to be revolving around the industrial sector in commercial real estate. And so within industrial, you have a lot of subsectors. So you have warehouse and distribution, you have fulfillment centers, self-storage, cold storage, flex spaces, even like sports companies trying to utilize the space for like basketball, golf ranges, pickleball. Like there's a lot of different uses for industrial properties, and when it comes down to it, it is the best performing asset class overall in commercial real estate, and it's an asset class that lenders and investors they're more comfortable investing and lending money on in comparison to like retail, office, and the other sectors. So overall, that's why I chose both industrial and multifamily as two sectors that I wanted to research the most and become more knowledgeable, because that's frankly where the highest potential returns are, and over the long term they perform the most and are the most stable. So if you're looking to get into commercial real estate, I'd just recommend going off of like what you know most in the industry. So if you know like small businesses, retail businesses that you've researched for a while, and you know the company, the tenants more, the tenant base more, then it's a wise idea to maybe go into that. So it all depends on your preference and your interests. So within industrial, definitely an evolving market for sure. But today I'm just going to walk through how to evaluate a deal, how to look at a market, how to kind of define your criteria and investment philosophy when you're going into it. And so I'm also going to be sharing like a bunch of resources that you can use, and some insights from industry professionals, larger development companies, and also some insight as far as like the tenants that are involved in the space. So I'm just gonna quickly share my screen here so we can all follow along. And if you're tuning in on the YouTube channel, it might be easier just because I'm kind of going through a lot of sources. So big company, you've heard of it probably before, Prologis, the leading company in the industrial warehouse and distribution space. And honestly, they had a really thought-provoking and intriguing differentiating strategy when I first heard about it. So since I'm still kind of new, relatively new to commercial real estate, probably like 3 to 4 years in, I first heard of Prologis that first year, and I started researching their stock from an investment standpoint, and they were involved in a lot of different like stocks, REITs, ETFs, and I just wanted to just dive in and see what their business was all about. So what I learned is that they niche down into just warehouse and distribution centers, and they didn't get to sidetracked with the other sectors like manufacturing, like cold storage, self-storage, all of those aspects. And so with warehouse and distribution, I think it does have the most scale. And with the evolving technology trends in the business, with automation, robotics, and overall just becoming more efficient, and from an operational standpoint, it definitely has the most value and growth. So when you're looking into it, I'd highly recommend looking at Prologis. They also report a bunch of like blogs, insights such as this one right here. And they're very informative about like what they're doing, what they're seeing in the market, and the trends that are helping them stay above their competition. So really cool stuff. So I'm just going to kind of go through this article, read it to you, and also just give a little bit of my input on it. So optimizing. So this is just 5 key strategies to optimize your warehouse operations. So it starts with the need for speed, accuracy, efficiency has been ever more pressing in your business as it strives to meet the ever-growing demands of your customers. So the first trend is optimize warehouse layout. So the layout is very critical in warehouse and distribution. So if you're talking about flex spaces tend to maybe have like a 50-50 split of office and industrial, or it could be like anywhere ranging like the 20 to 50% range as far as the dedicated office space. And with flex spaces, you're not going to get like dock level loading. You're going to get grade level loading, and probably like smaller size building, maybe ranging from like 10 to 20,000 square feet. And with flex space, it's really a matter of finding a tenant that is in need of that type of asset. And with flex spaces, it's typically like older construction, so it may need some renovation aspects here and there. And obviously the renovation aspects within industrial, the exterior, the interior in terms of like the sprinkler systems, the column spacing, the actual floor top. So whether it's concrete slab or a different material, maybe that needs resurfacing. And then in terms of the exterior, the actual exterior facade, and the parking lot, if that needs resurfacing, and if there is some minor tweaks as far as like increasing yard space so that trucks can get in and out of the facility easier, those are all options. And then in terms of the actual like conditions, like the HVAC, electrical, plumbing situation, the energy usage at the building, these are all aspects that you need to consider in terms of condition risks. So that's in the flex space world. When it comes to larger warehouse and distribution centers, typically they're more well defined and well like laid out. But yeah, I'm just going to read this quick little excerpt from Prologis. It says, optimizing warehouse space is crucial to maximizing operational efficiency and profitability. Well-designed layouts not only reduce material handling costs by 15 to 19%, but also contribute to overall increased productivity. Maximizing your warehouse cube is essential to make the most of the available space. With the average clear height of logistics facilities increasing, warehouses can now store more inventory per square foot, leading to improved storage density and better space utilization. SKU slotting is another important consideration in layout design. By analyzing sales data and product characteristics, companies can determine the optimal placement for products to minimize travel time and reduce the time required to retrieve items, with an up to 40% increase in picking efficiencies. So within a warehouse space, it's critical to have ease of operations and ease of moving in and moving out, right? So within like the marshaling area where products are dropped off and then they're picked up by another truck on the other side, it's critical to have optimizing characteristics in all of that. So whether it's like going through the procurement, the inspection of the product, and overall, maybe it needs to go through packaging, labeling. All of those aspects can happen in the marshaling area. And overall, like you see this picture right here, it's pretty complex and intricate in terms of like how products kind of go through that area. They're moved around, they're inspected, and overall, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of sort packages and get it out to the end consumer. So that's exactly the point of marshaling areas. It just allows for an easier transition from products moving in and then moving out. And obviously, clear heights is another important aspect. So with larger industrial properties, warehouse and distribution properties that I'm talking about particularly, you're going to have like 40 to 50 feet clear height as like the minimum. Whereas like flex spaces, it could range from like 18 to all the way up to 30 feet, right? So different levels of clear height, and it also depends on what the landlord and also the tenant requires of their building, and exactly what type of operations the tenant is going to be running in the building, right? So in terms of like the risk profile in a tenant, obviously the larger tenants are going to have the least amount of risk. They have the credit to survive the lease term, longer term lease term. I'm talking about probably like 5 to 10 years, and they also have the capacity to sustain like economic downturns in the market. So those are all contributing factors to a well like grade A tenant. And some examples, obviously, you've heard of Amazon, DHL is another company, UPS, FedEx. So the list goes on in terms of like the larger grade A tenants. But when you get down to the grade C tenants, or like on the C to B minus kind of fringe range, you're gonna have to go through a more rigorous screening process in terms of learning about their business, what exactly they do, the growth outlook of their business, and if they have the credit to survive that lease, and if it might be more beneficial to structure a shorter term lease so that it's not too much of a financial burden for them. So those are all great conversations to have with your tenant. It's critical to get in front of your tenant like from day one, when they show interest to the property. Really define all the goals, the scope of work, and the operations that they're going to be running, so that you can get a better sense of some of the management that you'll have to be doing to keep track of their performance. So yeah, and so optimizing warehouse layout is a critical component. The tenant may also need like a certain amount of office space. Maybe they want like a huge office space with 2 floors with some mezzanine floor space, right? So depends on what also the employee base that is going to be working there, and what exactly they're requiring out of their workforce. So yeah. And then streamline order picking. So this is another topic. Efficient order picking is crucial for any warehouse operation, and optimizing the process can make a significant difference in overall efficiency. It's important to understand the different types of order picking methods available, as well as their benefits and drawbacks, to choose the most suitable approach for your needs. Recent industry data shows that order picking can account for 55% of total warehouse operating costs. Streamlining the process can result in substantial cost savings and increased productivity. With batch picking or zone picking, where workers are designated specific areas from which to pick, you can minimize travel time and boost efficiency. Forklift type is crucial to streamline the order picking process for fast and accurate picking. So with order picking, they mentioned the two main ones, batch picking and zone picking. But you're going to have some extraordinary machines involved, such as forklifts, maybe some autonomous robots. And you're also going to have like larger racking systems that are going to kind of sort and organize all of the different products in your facility. So the forklift is one energy concern, I would say. With forklifts, it does utilize a lot of power, and it's going to be pretty much running throughout the day. I guess a good energy saving tip would be that when they are not in use, that they automatically shut off, and that saves a little bit of energy, so it doesn't have to be frequently charged, and the energy output at your building is a lot less. So those are all like money saving tips that can reduce your utility bill overall. It's wise to kind of exercise all of these energy conservation methods, because an industrial facility can eat up like energy like in a heartbeat. So you really have to kind of track what exactly your energy output is going to be. So number 3 here, it says integrate smart tech and seamless connectivity. For fulfillment technology, it's essential to understand your challenges in terms of inventory and data accuracy, as well as the quality of connectivity through your facility. So warehouse management systems, scanning equipment, and inventory control software provide excellent automation and streamline inventory management tools to achieve enhanced operational efficiency. Warehouse operators who implement WMS technology reported an average of 25% increased productivity and a significant reduction in errors. Smart technology like RFID and barcoding systems can also improve the inventory errors by over 90% and enhance receiving time and fulfillment accuracy. Furthermore, facilities with high quality connectivity and automation experience notable gains in productivity as well as reductions in labor costs. So pretty cool stuff. Technology is obviously going to have a huge impact on your overall operations. And the more the actual employees can kind of catch on and get familiarized with software is a critical component. So it just helps to streamline your operations and make just the distribution process and also the organization, the procurement process, all of those aspects. It makes it just a lot easier. So these are all great tips when you're in that larger space. I would say it's wise to kind of exercise all of these technology tools, and then implement scalable automation. Automation is an important aspect of supply chain ops, and implementing scalable solutions can help increase efficiency while reducing costs. Solutions built to support both current and future needs with flexibility in setup and usage capacities can help account for spikes in demand and changing operational requirements. A master plan concept can also help you plan for long term, ensuring your infrastructure to set up to phase into your space over time. So scalable automation solutions such as automated storage and retrieval systems and autonomous mobile robots, which I mentioned, can help reduce labor costs, improve inventory accuracy, and increase throughput. Gradually integrating scalable automation solutions will exist into existing workflows, minimizes disruptions to operations, and allows for more efficient scaling as demand increases. And then maximize forklift fleet efficiencies. So forklifts are a critical component of warehouse ops. They can also be costly and a drainage of energy, especially as you tier up businesses can reduce costs and improve sustainability by conducting an energy study and implementing best practices such as turning off forklifts when not in use and optimizing travel routes. So yeah, all of this stuff is things that I mentioned because you see here, like you're utilizing this forklift throughout the day, and when it's not in use, it's still burning energy since it's on. These are just like quick energy saving tips. Even implementing like LED lighting systems, taking out the conventional fluorescent lighting is a good tip. So yeah, and then another wise thing is that like the amount of energy load that you're going to put in the facility depends entirely up to the tenant's usage of the facility, right? So if their operations doesn't require as much energy, then it's wise to kind of save that like implementation of energy until the tenant is ready to occupy the space, right? So I think that's another critical component to just do the energy study with your tenant and all of their requirements and what exactly they're saying would be like the threshold in terms of energy usage. So that just gives you a better idea so that you're not overspending on the energy implementation at your facility and you're overall just saving on your utility bill. So yeah, all great topics here. AMRs are going to be a huge topic in the industrial space, and obviously also with autonomous trucks, even dropping and shipping products. It's an entirely different ballgame than what it was 5-10 years ago. So with electric vehicles, autonomous trucks, there's a huge cost savings and energy efficiency that can definitely impact overall operations. So yeah, that was just a quick article from Prologis. I guess this one is also pretty cool. So I highly just encourage to just go through this process. Overall, they'll kind of inform you like quarter by quarter. They have like a industrial business indicator that they release like every quarter. So that's pretty cool news to just stay on top of the market a little bit. So Yeah, and then this is the big differentiating strategy that Prologis had, is that when they took on these warehouse and distribution centers, they took an aim to minimize capex as much as possible, right? So um, yes, you will have some aspects like such as the basic units of the property that will need replacement, such as the roof, HVAC units, electrical plumbing systems, and overall interior exterior finishes and upgrades. But not to get overly excited with the trends and the technology evolving that's changing the space, and really doing more research and seeing if that's actually necessary at the subject property. So that will definitely help to define your capex budget a little bit better, and focusing in on actual operation expenses, and to maintain like the actual facilities condition, and minimize the actual condition risk at your site is really important. So OpEx is another aspect that it is pretty minimal in the industrial space. I would say there are only like 4 to 5 major expenses in OpEx, which are utilities and common area maintenance, taxes, insurance, and maybe a property management fee. That's about it. You're not getting too involved with all the extraordinary expenses that are in like multifamily, retail, or office. And so with that, it creates a lot less headache, and from a management standpoint, it's a lot easier to handle like vendor relationships, contract services, and just makes that whole process just a lot smoother. So yeah, this is kind of like a trend in terms of uh I think supply chain trends. So yeah, it's saying here, however, with increasing volatility and uncertainty in the supply chain industry, shifting towards OpEx to maintain financial flexibility and risk reduction. And so, yeah, and then furthermore, the tax benefit of choosing OpEx means immediate savings for improved cash flow when it's needed most. That's another benefit. And so overall, that's a critical component there. And then optimizing the space, which we already went over, and then investing in IT infrastructure. So basically, to stay competitive and future focused, investment in IT is essential and the biggest differentiator. So key opportunities would include upgrading hardware, software, networking capabilities, the harness increased bandwidth, redundancy, and access points, all great techniques to upgrade your IT infrastructure. So yeah, and it makes getting real-time data, even like back from the property level, it makes that also a lot easier, so that asset management can coordinate effectively and address bottlenecks and problems within the operations immediately. So that's another aspect. It just increases communication a lot better, and yeah, I definitely see the value in that. So yeah, so those are just some quick articles that I just recommend maybe taking a look at. And when you're kind of starting out with your research, um, I always started with researching companies like this, and then also just researching brokerage reports. So with brokerage reports, they will give you some insights in terms of the average rent per square foot in that area, the price per square foot for industrial properties, some lease and sale activity, some supply pipeline activity. So those are all great things that you can get a better sense of what's happening in your market, right? So really encourage you to read brokerage reports, because you get to learn the actual players in the industry, like development companies, um, logistics companies, people that are leasing out space, the tenant base, right? So these are all great things and practices to keep in mind. So yeah, and then when you're talking about like defining your investment philosophy, I would start with the market, right? So with the market, it's depending on your research and what you do. I would always start with markets that are increasing in population and have a stable job market. So with job growth and population growth, maybe some better like positive migration trends, and overall a more diverse economy that hits on all industrial sectors, or not industrial sectors, all the industry sectors. So from IT, government services, financial services, real estate companies, the actual like brick and mortar retail services, right? There's a lot of, and the small business activity as well. There's a lot of different components that go into a diverse economy. So understanding, even just doing like a quick Google Map search, right? I would literally just do a Google Map search of your subject property, and then see what's happening in that area. So within industrial, you want to have close proximity to the actual corridors and the major highways, railroad systems, even, and also bus routes, because it makes that more convenient for employees to get in and out from the site. So these are all components that will help to define your market. I would also just say when you're looking at the actual stats, so I would look for a market that maybe doesn't have like that much supply coming in the pipeline, but their net absorption is really good, meaning that area has absorbed space at a higher rate than others. The vacancy level is really low, and also the rent per square foot is at a healthy amount, and the price per square foot is relatively at a discount. I would say that's like the ideal place to invest in. And then also in terms of the ideal space and how you structure the deal. So warehouse distribution centers are great. Flex spaces can also be opportunistic. But with those types of properties, triple net lease is the goal. So from a landlord's perspective, you don't want to be paying some of these larger expenses. And even if you can negotiate a net lease, that's even beneficial from a landlord's perspective, because from the tenant's perspective, they're going to be operating the space, they're going to be taking care of the place. So I guess it's all up to negotiation, and also if the tenant has the capacity to pay all of those expenses over the long term, because they will eventually increase, and things can get tricky in terms of insurance premiums going up, taxes getting reassessed, right? So operating expenses can definitely go up pretty quickly. So keep in mind about that. And then I would also just say, I'll get into this later in terms of like evaluating, but I would also say, from an industrial perspective, you need to be in a place where there isn't going to be any conflict with neighboring zoned areas. So what I usually do is like I go on the zoning map, I see where the subject property is. Is there a problem with the current zoning? If it's light industrial, great, that's fine. But if it's nearby like a residential, higher density residential zoned area, is there going to be any problems with the facility and the track record of I guess oppositions that have been at that project site? So those are all things to consider. And overall, depends also on your business plan, what exactly you're going to be doing with the facility. If you're upgrading a lot of stuff, if there's going to be heavy renovations going on, you need to go through township approval, and go through like land use restrictions and covenants and restrictions. So there's a whole layer of things that you'll need to kind of unravel as you go through your project. But yeah, and so those are all just things that I would watch out for. And so sources I use for just basic stats, Census Bureau and Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's where I get population and job growth figures. I also use NAR for cap rates and net absorption levels. You can also just compare this with the brokerage reports to make sure things are somewhat consistent. And it also just helps to maybe call a broker who's active in the market, just to get a sense of what all of these average metrics are at. So you get a more up to date in time data from your brokers. So here, for example, from NAR, from the industrial portion from this report, they have net absorption levels in the last 12 months. They have market rent growth levels, the market rent per square foot, the vacancy levels, total sales volume, the market cap rate, the net deliveries, and the inventory supply. So these are all great metrics to just get an idea of what's happening. And you can also just like jot these notes down in your underwriting so that you have it like with you. So yeah, and then when you're comparing just like the preliminary underwriting, or kind of like the screening test that I would say, it kind of works the same in terms of all the other sectors that you're analyzing in commercial real estate. So with opportunistic investments, you're looking for the highest spread between the yield on cost and the market cap rate. With value add, it's I would say slightly below that, and it could range in different sectors within the industry. But once you start analyzing deals, you see what the average spreads are, then you'll get a better idea of actually what's happening. So yeah, and then obviously the core plus and the core deals, they're going to have the least spread, and it's going to be more of a yield and cash flow play at that point. So yeah, and then so these are all sources I use, maybe even venturing into city data a little bit, just because they have like crime reports, other statistics that could be valuable. So yeah, definitely some quick tips there. And what I did initially in terms of just learning about my market, so I would pull up the zoning map in my county. I'd see what areas would be zoned industrial, and then I would overlay that with the actual activity that's happening in the market. So within this, I use LoopNet, Crexi as the more industry standard public listing platforms. So basically, I would just go in here, filter out like the criteria that I'm looking for. So here I did flex, distribution, R&D, truck terminal, and warehouse space. And then you can filter it out even more in terms of like the investment and sale types, the tenancy type. So this can kind of narrow down. See, I put a minimum of a 4 cap in my filter there. So this gives you just a better idea of actually the more favorable deals in the market. And sometimes it's a little bit swayed, like just because this is a 9 cap doesn't actually mean that it's a 9 cap. Maybe it's just like good marketing. So you just never know until you actually dig down into the financials, in particular the T12 and the rent roll. So yeah, and then Crexi, similar setup. There's actually more filters with Crexi, which is kind of interesting. So more filters doesn't necessarily mean good filters, because you may not never like find a building if you put too many filters. But just things to keep in mind. It just gives you like good things to understand, like even like how to structure your deal in terms of see like tenant credit, the lease type. Obviously, these are all the basic leases. Class type, if it's in an opportunity zone, which is pretty cool, and the listing status as well. So yeah, all cool stuff that highly recommend just getting into. And then now just kind of getting into some of the checklist items that I would say. So this checklist was provided by Chad Griffiths. He's a industrial real estate broker, I think, in the Canada region. So he very cool stuff. He has got a YouTube channel, so he posts a lot of great content. So recommend checking his channel out. I'll leave it in the description as well. So he provided just this quick industrial workbook, I would say. So I'm just gonna kind of go through this and see what things would be valuable that I would use even in my underwriting. So Usually the base model that I use it from ACRE, a financial modeling company. So this is kind of like the base model at this point. I will be kind of like customizing this as I go in the sector. I might even add some of these items from this workbook into there, just so I can get a better idea of my underwriting skills and just defining that a little bit better. So as I go through this, I'll kind of just go from left to right, so we're not like jumping all over the place. But so this net effective rent calculator is really cool. So basically, all you need to input are the size, the lease term, TI allowance, leasing commissions, and basically all the blue font cells or the blue highlighted cells. So the net rental rate in that market, make sure you add a growth rate, which will most likely be in your lease agreement. Operating expenses, again, grow that with the same rate as the rent rates. And then the free rent periods, free net rent periods, my apologies, and then free gross rent periods. So I believe the difference between here would be um uh I'm actually not too sure as far as the difference. I guess it's just a total of concessions that are being offered. And then ultimately that gets down to your net effective rent. I mean, net effective rate. So basically this net effective rent rate, it's taking into consideration the TI allowance, obviously, the commissions that are being charged from your broker, operating expenses, and the concessions that you're offering your tenant. So all of those costs, it nets it out. It gets down to a more defined rental rate, and that you can compare to your what's it called? Just the top line rental rate, and see if there's too much of a spread, and see if there's strategies that you can implement to mitigate costs. So yeah, and then. So this is just a quick calculator. I thought it was pretty cool. So the net rental rate is right here. So you're starting at 8, growing it by like 3% per year. And then the net effective rate is 7.33. So you see a loss of 67 cents per square foot between this amount and the net effective rate. So yeah, and then this next tab is a rent roll. So pretty cool. Just basic stuff within rent rolls. So all great stuff there. Now this property checklist, I thought this was really great. So these are aspects, and I'll also overlay another checklist that I had. Again, that one's also from ACRE, but we'll show you kind of like the steps that it takes to go through a project like fully, you know. So from an investor standpoint, these are all things that you need to have, and you need to make sure that they're verified right away. So some will take time, and I apologize for saying right away. We're not living in like a in a day kind of world, you know, a snap of the fingers, but it will take time according to your purchase and sale agreement and the contingency periods that you define in there. So yeah, so the first thing, property title, land title certificate, that'll come from your title report, tax assessment certificate, so that you consult with a tax professional on that one, and also see like if they already have a past, like the past year's certificate. I think that would also be valuable, so you can get better underwriting stats from that. And then survey real property report. So this would probably be like an Alta survey. So it's pretty much a plat and block type survey. Just defines like the use and setbacks, and just overall it's like a just a land survey and property survey, I would say. So environmental site assessment. So this is critical in any industrial building. ESAs, phase 1, it could range all the way up to phase 4, which I hope you don't get into. You want to make sure you stop at phase 1, and if not at the most phase 2. because it can get tricky with brownfield sites and environmentally contaminated sites. So with site assessment, it's kind of a more intricate and complex area, but they're basically just going to be looking at your site, and if there is some condition in terms of the neighboring facilities and their operations, if there's some like oil hazards in terms of like spillage that could occur. And they're also from the desktop slash just like brief like on-site report. That's what I would say is phase one. Phase two is more of a actual soils and borings testing report, where they're testing for any type of contaminant substances in the soils. So that would be phase two. That could also include like a geotechnical report and basically observing like the wildlife, like the preservation sites around the area. So it's a more complex report, which is phase two. And phase three and phase four, again, it's literally just kind of deep diving in even more, making sure that all of the things have been remediated or it's scheduled to be remediated. So that's a pretty lengthy process, I would say. So that's something to clear off the bat. And then the appraisal report. So that also depends on from your lender. Building condition assessment. So maybe the lender has a preference in terms of the engineer and the inspection company that they want to be using. But the building assessment is critical because they're going to be going through all the different units of the property and seeing all the different things that need to get replaced and the useful life of those items. So for instance, if a roof is like 10 years in and maybe it has a 15, 20-year lifespan, they're going to recommend replacing it in year 5, and you have to budget for that. So and then also if there's some electrical or plumbing issues, maybe a certain portion of the building has some leaks, and that needs to get replaced, right? So these are all aspects that the condition report will address. And then component reports, again, it's more like individual units of the property. So maybe just a full-on roof report, full like HVAC report, maybe a exterior report. So those are all like component reports. As-built drawings. So if the seller has some historical drawings that they can provide to you, that's also great. But if you are going through a more extensive value add or renovation project, it's critical to involve your architect, your engineers early on in the process so that you can define your project goals and in terms of like sustainability, the actual cost that is going to be associated with all of the material, the labor, the sourcing, all that stuff. Architects and engineers will definitely help out in that aspect. So those are as-built drawings, and then floor plans and rent roll, copies of any existing leases, those can also be provided by the seller. Condo docs, I think this is a kind of a regional kind of thing. Maybe it happens in some regions, maybe it doesn't, but yeah, that's kind of interesting. So you have bylaws, reserve fund studies, and then the condo board meeting. So that's if your project is in an HOA kind of setup. So that would apply there. And then property specific information. So you have zoning, obviously. If you have to go through rezoning, if it's a ground up construction, you'll have to go through the subdivision process and getting approval from the township. But property taxes, condo fees, year built, warehouse size, office size, mezz size, total building size, land size. So all the different size comparisons that you want to do within your property and the dimensions that are going to be within your property. Because for instance, if the office space is not built out yet, this is all customizable according to the tenant's need. So again, it's critical to involve your tenant from an early stage, and so that they're more involved in the process and you can align interests, you can align goals, and you can deliver a more build to suite kind of product to your tenant. So yeah, and then I would say ceiling height is another critical component. Um, some tenants are very picky about like ceiling height, so it also depends on the types of racking systems that they're going to have in their facility and the total storage capacity that they're going to be requiring. So ceiling height definitely adds more cubic square footage to your facility, and it just helps to deliver a more favorable product, I would say. So just keep in mind of functional obsolescence. I know it's tough to have properties that are not within like the standard ceiling height, and it's a tough situation to be in because maybe it is a really good market and it has good growth potential in terms of rent rates, and vacancy levels are low, and the absorption levels there are great. But in terms of the actual property, and judging it off of the likelihood of a tenant leasing the space out, they're going to be very concerned about like aspects such as ceiling height, the power in the facility, the grade level doors, dock level loading, warehouse lighting, even, right? So there's all these components are going to be considered. Drainage and is another thing. So if you have a heavy manufacturing company, maybe like a welding company, and they're emitting like a lot of water from their operations, having good drainage is critical. Heating and cooling systems, makeup air systems. So this is for heavy manufacturing companies that emit a lot of heat and a lot of heat energy from their operations. So you need to have makeup air systems that pretty much come in with fresh air, clean, cool air, and take all that hot air out. So that's a makeup air system. It can be pretty costly to implement that. But again, it depends on your tenant's scope of work and what they're doing. So sprinkler systems, again, so ESFR is the more standard sprinkler system that is in today's building. So ESFR stands for early suppression fast response. So basically, when a fire happens in a facility, the ESFR system is going to be the fastest to put out that fire. Whereas like wet pipe and in-rack systems, they might be a little bit slower, but they'll still get the job done just in a slower amount of time. And then cranes, again, seeing again what the ceiling height is and if that crane is viable in that space. All good questions to ask. So this checklist, I always use this checklist when I'm just driving around. I see a property, I pull up this checklist and I just see like which things are at the facility, which things are not. And that just gives me a better idea if it's a favorable investment. So, and then this is a quick lease abstract. So this is great. This kind of helps to set up the tenant estoppel. So the estoppel is just like a reminder lease agreement, pretty much just going through the major terms of the lease. So this lease abstract, if you send this to your attorney, it makes it a lot easier for them to draft the estoppels. So yeah, so it's just going to go through size, commencement date, term, rent rates, any additional charges, renewal options, the lease type, what they're responsible for, deposit amount, and then all the different costs, and then the rights of like termination, I guess. So these are all items within the lease abstract. This is like a quick mortgage calculator, which is pretty cool. This IRR waterfall. So this is if you have passive investors in your deal, and they're contributing a certain amount of equity. So it's going to go through the equity split, the waterfall structure, the hurdle rates, the IRR hurdle rates, and then just a summary of the distribution schedule. So that's great. And then this is what I wanted to get at. So this is just a 10-year discounted cash flow analysis. So I think this is great. It might take a little bit of time for me to adjust to this type of analysis, just because it's a little bit different on the eyes for me. I'm more familiar with the ACRE model. and going through that. But I think there are components here that I can implement into the ACRE model. So for instance, this depreciation schedule, this may be according to Canada's laws and regulations with the IRS, but this depreciation schedule is something that I would definitely include in here eventually. So it'll take some time to just consult with some cost segregation and engineering experts to just get a better idea of how to implement that schedule. So yeah, and then this is another thing that I would say I might include. So obviously the operating expense ratio and the DSCR is included in the ACRE model, but some of these other things are kind of interesting. So you have NOI, you have or sorry, net income ratio, which is just comparing NOI and EGI. So you can see the growth in cost savings. So basically it's operating expense is equal to 1 minus net income ratio. So that's the equation there. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And then you have this equity dividend rate, which is kind of interesting. This implied cap rate at purchase, so the going in cap, default ratio, which is something that I looked at for a while and tried to understand a little bit better. So it's just operating expenses plus debt service divided by effective gross revenue or income. So basically it's taking the total expense load, the operating expense plus the debt service, and comparing that to EGI, and seeing how much is going away from your effective gross revenue, right? So 79% is going to be going away to operating expenses and debt service. So that's the default ratio that is you should take account for. And then this break-even occupancy is basically saying at the top line revenue, like the potential like gross revenue, if we were to assume the maximum amount of vacancy, what would that maximum amount of vacancy be, so that we would be net zero after covering our operating expenses and our debt service? So that's the equation here. So for instance, here is 77.83%. That's the minimum occupancy that we can have at the facility, right? So yeah, and then that's just that. And then coming back to this model, the one that I'm more familiar with, so this just kind of goes through like a 6-step process. So it just goes through the description of the property, and see, it's got like average clear height, so you can implement that. Parking spaces, building coverage, which is, I think is land area divided by, yeah, NRA. And so that's just the building description. This investment summary, so it just goes to the sources and uses of cash. So basically the uses would be the land costs, the hard costs, the soft costs. So all of those aspects would be included there. And then you got some carried costs. So this could happen in industrial. So you got some capitalized construction interest that could be carried over. You got other aspects there. So and then the uses over here, your debt and equity summary. So you can layer on 2 different like layers of debt. Obviously you can add more, but basically it's not good to add like 3 to 4 layers of debt. It can definitely get troublesome. But I would say 2 is the max that you want to have at your facility. So you got a construction loan and a mezz loan. So mezz loan kind of acts as like preferred equity, if you're familiar with that. So it's a different type of financing, but it is considered debt, whereas preferred equity would be considered in the equity section. So yeah, and then I'm not going to get like too nuanced here, but you got like a fixed tab here, which gets rid of the a variable rate display over there, and then you can add a perm loan to it. So this will literally just consider the perm loan and disregard all of this other financing for the debt portion. And then over here you have the operations. So the operation begin month, stabilization month, the tenant summary. So there's a quick a rent roll summary basically. In terms of the recovery income, you can customize that, the pro rata share accordingly. And then you can update your vacancy levels. You can update your costs, expenses that are at the facility. So this will literally just give you a month by month summary of the actual cash flows at your facility. So this pretty much calculates your net operating income at the end of the day. And then lastly, some capital expenditures. Those are at the end of the line here with cost reserves and CapEx reserves. So, and then also some of these assumptions, such as like renewal probability, the average rental rate in that market, TI allowances, commissions, the average lease term, free rent periods. So all those things should be considered. Then it gives you just a brief summary, a pro forma summary, comparing the stabilized, untrended pro forma to the sale component. I mean, I said sale component, sale pro forma. And then it also just gives you a summary of the cap rates. So the stabilized cap rate, the sell cap rate, and down below here in the return section, basically just includes your three main aspects, which are equity multiple, IRR, and net profit. You could also get cash on cash here, but I don't know if that's something you want to look at. It all depends on what your investors like to look at, and you can customize that accordingly. And then down here, development spread, that's critical, making sure that you have a sizable yield on cost spread between the stabilized, untrended yield on cost to the market cap rate, as well as the sale yield on cost to the market cap rate. So all great strategies and practices to implement in your underwriting. And you can also just compare this yield on cost spread to the preliminary like screening yield on cost spread. And if it matches up, and if there's a huge gap there, something probably went wrong in your underwriting. So it's kind of a red flag kind of thing, so that you can make sure that things are staying consistent. And then lastly, you have the waterfall structure. And then below that, you have your sensitivity analysis. So this is also customizable. For instance, you have vacancy sensitivities, exit cap rate sensitivities, income and expense growth sensitivities, and you're seeing what type of development spread that has an effect, and the equity multiple as well. So sensitivities are great because you can stress test the deal. I would also include another refinance and exit test in this scenario, and seeing like making an operational shock, capital market shock, seeing what happens if you do need to refinance out of your loan. What is the risks involved there, and do you meet your minimum loan balance at that period? So all great practices, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed just like briefly me just walking through this. I thought it was a really cool video that I did just about like the industrial sector, a sector that I'm really passionate about. I want to learn more about and just become more experienced in. So really looking forward even to this next market cycle. I think there are a lot of great opportunities coming forth, and there's going to be great like listing and sales volumes, and I just look forward to it and exploring different markets as well. So hope you guys like this video. Feel free to tune in the next time I post one, and appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you follow Savani Real Estate on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and also the YouTube channel, which is the same handle, Savani Real Estate. So thanks again for tuning in. All the notes will be down below, so feel free to take a look. So thanks again.